You've seen it happen, right? A single dumb comment online suddenly spirals into this massive crisis. We're talking firings, public shaming, the whole shebang. Well, today we're going to unpack a really powerful argument that connects these modern internet pile-ons to some of the biggest catastrophes in world history. Okay, let's get into it.
So, the author of our source material here kicks things off with this, a pretty surprising self-description. I mean, this is a guy who's deep into old stories, ancient history, theology. So why on earth has he become one of today's biggest defenders of really ugly, modern, and often super offensive speech? That's the puzzle we're going to try to solve.
So, how does it all start? It usually kicks off with something small, something you've probably scrolled past 100 times. But the author argues that there's a new and pretty dangerous pattern at play now, one that's turning simple words into full-blown weapons.
What really got this author thinking was this one little incident. After a major political event, a clip of a student making this just shocking, off-the-cuff comment goes completely viral. You know, it's the kind of thing that maybe a decade ago would have just vanished, but not today. No way.
And that clip does exactly what viral clips do now. It just explodes. It sets off this immediate, furious reaction. A digital mob forms, the student's personal info gets blasted all over the internet, and whatever institution they're connected to goes into complete, total panic mode.
And the fallout is incredibly fast and incredibly harsh. The author points out this whole cascade of people getting fired, making these public apologies. And here's the key takeaway, right? A few thoughtless words aren't just words anymore. They're now being treated as actual events that demand immediate and severe punishment.
Okay, so this brings us to the core idea of this whole piece. The author has this central metaphor he uses to explain what's going on. He calls it the ladder of escalation, and he argues it's this timeless pattern that explains everything from a Twitter mob to, believe it or not, a world war. And you can see this modern ladder playing out all the time. It starts with one offhand comment. That comment becomes a viral clip, then comes the massive public pile-on, and the final rung, well, it's often the complete destruction of someone's career and reputation. It's a clear, predictable, and frankly, a pretty terrifying progression. Now, to show that this isn't just some new internet fad, the author puts our modern ladder right next to this one from history. A single assassination in Sarajevo, right? That one act climbed the rungs of alliances and outrage until it became World War I. And the treaty that ended that war? It was so harsh, it basically just set the stage for the next, even bigger war. The pattern he's saying is the same. Small acts, when they're met with fury instead of procedure, they escalate and they get out of control fast.
So if this ladder of escalation is so dangerous, what's actually letting it happen? Well, the author points to this really crucial difference between our official legal system and this new, informal system of judgment that has a ton of power.
Think of it like this. There are two systems running at the same time. On one side, you've got the official U.S. legal system. It has all these built-in breaks, like the First Amendment that protects speech. But on the other side, you have private power. We're talking social media platforms, your boss, online mobs. They have zero constitutional constraints. They are, as the author calls them, efficient enforcers. They can ruin your life over a tweet in a way the government simply can't.
All right, this brings us to what's probably the author's most challenging idea. He argues that the solution isn't to get better and faster at punishing ugly speech. In fact, he says we need to do the exact opposite. We need to learn to tolerate it, because that messy, difficult process is the essential work of a free society.
And let's be really clear here. He's not saying this because he enjoys hateful content. He says right here he hates the viciousness. His defense is all about strategy. He genuinely believes that tolerating ugly speech is, in the long run, way less dangerous to a society than empowering mobs to go on purge missions.
And this gets to the absolute core of his definition of what civilization even is. It's not about everyone being polite and nice. It's the slow, frustrating, but vital art of stopping our first impulse, our desire to grab an axe or, a digital pitchfork, and choosing a process instead.
So really, we're faced with the choice between two kinds of societies. You have a town that argues, where the currency is law and procedure, even if it's slow and clunky. And then you have a town that shoots, where the currency is violence and getting things done right now. The author's basically saying that all these online cancellations, with their demand for quick, satisfying justice, it's just the modern version of a frontier duel.
And that leads us to the final choice, the ultimate question the author is posing here. It's a really stark decision between two completely different ways of handling our deepest, most bitter disagreements.
See, when you start relying on outrage and these quick solutions, there are major long-term consequences. Naming and shaming becomes how you govern. You stop trying to persuade people. You just cancel their livelihoods. And that doesn't solve anything. It just creates martyrs, it builds deep resentment, and as the 20th century showed us over and over, that kind of repression often just breeds an even more extreme reaction.
The argument here is that this frontier logic, this impulse to settle things now with force, it's universal. It never really went away. We may have put away the dueling pistols, but the core logic is exactly the same. Today, our weapons are just different: doxing, algorithms, and complete professional annihilation.
So what's the solution? Well, he calls it an ugly, simple answer. Protect the public square, even when it's messy and filled with things you hate. Handle disputes through slow, deliberate procedures, not quick, satisfying purges. We have to train ourselves to resist that addictive rush of performative anger, and most of all, we have to remember the lessons of history. And that leaves us with this final, really provocative question. The author's entire argument kind of boils down to this. If we, as a society, formally decide that words are a form of violence, what does that make a legitimate response to that violence? The historical answer to that question is not pretty. And we'll end with this haunting warning. That ladder of escalation, it's easy to climb up, but it's almost impossible to climb back down. The author's whole plea is for us to choose the difficult, frustrating work of argument over the satisfying, warm glow of the torches. Because history teaches us that once we choose fire, the path back to civilization can be lost for a very, very long time.